auto resetting app permissions on your Android devices.
So Ken, looks like Google's going to be hitting the big red button on a lot of Android apps. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So what they're doing, Andy and Ganesh, is they're going to take a feature that they introduced with Android 11 and actually make it run in any Android operating system that's running version 6 and above, which will potentially bring better security and privacy features to, if I was reading the article correctly, potentially billions of devices. And that was billion with a B.
Wow.
So what this feature is in Android 11 right now, if you've given your device, whether it's a phone or some kind of IoT device, say an app permission to use your camera or some other feature, maybe access contacts or something like that. If you don't use that app for a period of time, they didn't get into the specifics of exactly how long it is, but what Android 11 will do is actually reset the app's permissions, so it won't necessarily have access to, let's say, your camera any longer. And so what they're doing is, by making this available down to Android 6, I think they said API level 23 and above, is you're essentially backporting this to almost 6-7 years worth of devices that have been out in the environment, in the ecosystem, that maybe haven't been updated, maybe haven't been touched, and whether it's an app that someone legitimately downloaded or even worse, potentially a malicious app, if those permissions can be taken away and someone's not using the app, it's probably better for their privacy, less chance of something being leaked online or potentially being exposed via either a malicious app or just using something that you aren't actually using. Like I said, this is going to impact not just the phones, but if you have, maybe a tablet or some kind of device that's running Android 6 and above, beginning, I believe it was later this fall, those will start to be rolled out to have this privacy feature enabled. There are some exceptions that Google was saying. Certain things that are going to be exempt. If you think about probably some of the more homegrown type apps or something that maybe a user gives explicit permission to, which always then carries the possibility that part of that malicious app or phishing link will be to try to get the user to disable this behavior. So just more for, you read something like this and say, oh, this is great, that the user now doesn't have to worry about this, but they still need to be aware. But I just found this to be a really interesting article and an update that they're going to be, essentially backporting it to all these different versions of Android device that either haven't been updated or couldn't be updated. So I think that's great.
This is another welcoming story from the security search sector, Ken. I mean, some initiative with list of list basically compiling what exploits are being added, and also your story. Google is taking steps to basically, get rid of some privacy-related as well as security issues, right? That's a really welcoming change. And you mentioned it's not 1 or 2 devices. You said with 1 billion devices. So that's a huge footprint of the mobile devices in the maybe Android space.
Well, I mean, I agree with Ganesh. I think it's good to see that this sort of progress is being made. We don't usually see companies issuing software updates for devices 7 years prior. Usually they're kind of lost and forgotten at that point. And that's just sort of the industry practice. Technology just moves so quickly that companies just can't you can't be thinking about devices you released in 2015 because there's just so much has changed since then that you've got entire teams dedicated to something that's so old and the user base for it is so small. So it's nice to see that this is going to be pushed to previous devices so far back that it's going to reach over 1 billion devices. That's kind of nuts. But I mean, like Ganesh was saying, the whole goal of this move, I think, from my perspective, is to increase privacy, increase security on apps that you download from the Google Play Store, which is great because we've seen some issues come from the Google Play Store in the past. It's got a little bit of a checkered history as far as malware and the security of the applications that you download from there. That being said, if somebody downloads a calculator app that wants your camera and it wants your microphone, first of all, you should be questioning that because why would a calculator app need that? Sure, like Ganesh was saying. But I do like this feature coming out where, hey, maybe you download that calculator app and you don't use it for, however amount of time that they decide, those permissions get restricted. And then, let's say you go back to that app and now I assume, I don't think the article goes into exactly how this will work, but I assume when you go into that app again after X amount of time and those permissions have been reset, you're going to get prompted again to explicitly allow those same permissions again. And hopefully that means the second time around you'll think, wait a minute, why am I allowing my calculator to access my camera? That's kind of weird. But it's a welcome change, I think, because anytime security and convenience intersect with each other, I feel like as a security guy, convenience wins so often because people don't want to do things to help them be more secure. And I get it. Sometimes it can be very cumbersome. So in this case, obviously they made the decision to say, look, we would rather have people explicitly allow these permissions, after X amount of time than just let them be set and they're just set for as long as they're on the phone. We want to do something to sort of mitigate that. And I count that as a security win. Because like I said, anytime those two things intersect, security and convenience, it's nice to know that, security wins at least some of the time. And in this case, it did.
Yeah. And I think it helps too. I know we tend to think of this in terms of phones, but if we look at IoT, we think of, I'm just going to use the example of like maybe a home security camera is running an Android operating system, right? And someone who maybe set that up just sets it up and forgets about it after that, right? And maybe at the time they had downloaded something onto it because it said, oh, this will be good to have on here for my security camera. And it's been 3 years or however many years or however many months of that device having, giving access to, say, the camera or the microphone to who knows what. So without really the user having to do anything at this point, that ability gets, taken away in order to give that more secure, more private environment. The one thing I'll say, and this might butt heads a little bit with the user experience portion of it, but I was wondering as I was reading this, would it be possible to almost configure the amount of time you want before that reset happens, right? Maybe for a certain app, you can say a week or, 2 days or 2 months, right? But then it becomes probably a little more of a pain in the rear for the user to manage and be like, what did I say for this? What did I do for that?
Yeah, it might get a little hard to track, with the durations of different apps and whatnot. But I do like the idea of user customizable sort of permission expiration times. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think both have excellent points. I just want to add, I think the competitor to Android world in the iOS sphere, I think while something is accessing any app is trying to access some sort of access, I think there are a couple options. It gives the user allow while using the app. I think the duration of that access would be only for how long the user is intend to use that specific app. For example, let's say I'm using some maps app, and I would say allow while only using this map. I think as soon as the user closes that app, that access is gone. So I believe it can be done, like you said, Ken, and I would like to see by default for all of the apps. I mean, with the exception of, I understand there are some system-related, CAP files or something that needs to be done. Of course, for those, I don't believe it's a good idea to give access to the average users to muck with it. I mean, it basically loses most of the criticality. Maybe it gives some avenues to add in. But I think non-essential, non-system related apps, everything could be controlled by that capability, I believe.
That's a good point, Ganesh. I did want to add, the article also talks about how Google announced plans to add what the article describes as iOS-style privacy labels, which is kind of cool. Okay. And I think what that's referring to, it's to app listing. So I'm pretty sure what it's referring to is Apple's recent decision to sort of have like a privacy nutrition facts in the App Store, which sort of it shows users, what's being tracked, what's being, what's identifiable, how is it being shared and whatnot, which is a welcome change. And it also mentions that Google also moved to strip users' advertising IDs for people who opt out of ad personalization. These are all welcome privacy changes, and I think obviously it was sparked by Apple kind of doing all that stuff on their platform first, and people seemed to like it. I remember when, I think it was iOS 14 is what it was. I'm blanking exactly on which version or iteration.
That would make sense.
Yeah, I think it was
probably one of the early 14s.
Right, but Apple announced that with that operating system, it would come with that new that tracking. It would defeat tracking. Ask app not to allow tracking or something. And essentially, what it would do is it would strip advertising IDs out, and it would restrict an app from using identifiable information, based on your Apple ID or your device itself, what have you. And there was a big fuss. If you remember, I think Facebook got involved and was very upset that Apple had decided to put that power into users' hands. And I remember shortly after that came out, there was a lot of polls asking people if they preferred to opt in or if they preferred to opt out. And it was like 85% or 90% of the people chose to just don't track me at all. So clearly privacy, even as something as simple as, hey, I don't want the fact that my device, purchased this app or something, just being sold to third-party companies, even something as simple as that is important enough to people for them to actually make that decision. So these are all welcome changes. I'm glad to see that the industry as a whole is moving toward a more privacy-centric approach. I like that we as users of smartphones get to choose, what level of privacy we care for. It's a tough battle for these companies, because it's got, on one hand, you've got Ron Swanson, who hates the fact that Google Maps exists because you could see his house even from a satellite view. And then on the other, you've got a lot of people, or rightfully so, who just I just want my phone to work. I want it to do the things that I want it to do as easily as it can possibly do it. And I get that. So, it's a hard group of people to satisfy. And by group of people, I mean anybody who uses a smartphone, which is billions of people. But again, very, very welcome change on Google's part. I'm glad to see that the industry as a whole is moving toward a more privacy-centric future.